How's it going, everybody? This is Ron Sparkman, and I am the Chief Curiosity Correspondent for the Space Foundation Discovery Center. And today we have an amazing episode of Space4U Live with the man, the myth, the legend who created Searching for Skylab, Dwight Steven. I'm not going to attempt to say his last name because every time I say it, I screw it up. You want to tell everybody what it is, Dwight?
Boniecki, and you have to say it with a fake Polish accent, otherwise I'll send the boys round.
Boniecki. So, and that's the thing too, is that you see that and there's no S in there. And that's the thing that always throws me off, is that I want to say something entirely different. So I'm glad you threw that in there.
The easiest thing, just remember it rhymes with jet ski.
There you go. Boniecki. There you go. See, that's the way that we do it here. Always finding things out, sometimes on the fly. So that's one of the fun parts about it being live. So today, Dwight, we're going to talk to you a little bit about really this passion you have for Skylab. And so before we dive into that, first, let's talk a little bit about what inspired you in space and science, because the thing that you've been doing is a somewhat recent thing for you, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, I mean, my interest in space goes back to 1972, December. I remember, and I was 3.5 years old then, watching the Apollo 17 astronauts on the lunar surface. I was watching it live on Australian television. And, I grew up while Apollo was happening. I was born in February 1969. So for me, my early years were just surrounded with the space program. My father was just in awe of the United States program. He was originally from Poland, mother from Germany, and I grew up in Australia. So I'm first generation Australian, now living in Germany. Anyway, back to the story. And my father, while they were on the surface of the moon, this is like, I can remember this vividly. And don't forget, Australia is summertime in December. He took me outside. It was a warm summer's night, and the moon was nearly full in our hemisphere. And he pointed to the moon. He goes, "Can you see the astronauts on there? Can you see them on there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can." Oh, I can't. And that remained with me. And, going to school, this is the thing that shows my age. I went to school. Our school year in Australia starts in February. I started kindergarten February of 1974. So I started school after Skylab had finished its program with the manned missions. SL4 had returned to Earth by the time I went to school. Now, I remember vividly the altitude approach and landing tests from the space shuttle, and thinking, "Oh, this is going to be so cool. I'll get to see this, and I'll go up to Skylab," because I was talking about taking the shuttle to Skylab. And it never happened. The next thing I hear about Skylab is 1979. A poster on the school principal's office was saying Skylab is falling, and it explained about what Skylab had done, and that we were in the footpath. Australia was in the footpath of or footprint of where this thing could possibly hit. And I remember waking up the morning after it hit and went, "Oh, lucky." I thought as a 10-year-old boy it would be my house that was hit, and figured out it was Western Australia, which for somebody growing up in Sydney, it's like, well, that's ways away. And then I forgot about Skylab, and it in my mind had the stigma of a failure, because how can they not keep a space station up in space? What the hell's going on here? And then the space shuttle was delayed. It's like, NASA, come on, guys. You send you send astronauts to the moon. You can't sort your stuff out now. What's going on here? And shuttle forward to, I watched SES-1 launch live at 4 a.m. in the morning Australian time. My parents woke me up, and that was the first time I saw a real rocket launch on television. And it was really interesting the other day when, Ron, you were saying you were there at the launch for the Starlink deployment. And that reminded me of STS-1, watching the space shuttle launch, and then later that day going outside and watching STS-1 fly over Australia, because, of course, the tracking stations in Canberra meant that its flight path would eventually come over Australia at some point. And the other day when that rocket launched, I watched it, and I'm looking, going, "Hey, it's going to fly over Cologne, Germany." I'll run out to the balcony, and sure as hell, I see this rocket fly over. I'm like, wow, that's like 1981. So thank you for that reliving of my teenage years. Now,
glad to be there for you, man. Glad to be there for you.
That deviated from how I got passionate about Skylab, didn't it? People are like, just shut up, man, and get to the point.
Did that just happen? Like, that was just a couple days ago. So I fell in love with space a week ago. I was talking to Ron, even though I'd already made this film. Well, really wasn't a big fan of it, but
yeah, which leads me to my next point: don't do drugs. Now, coming back to all seriousness. When I was researching the book Live TV from the Moon, I was interviewing very extensively Stan LeVar, who was the Westinghouse project manager for the lunar surface television camera. And I wanted to know how Westinghouse developed that black and white camera and also the color cameras that were used in the command module and then on the surface, lunar surface later in the Apollo missions. And every discussion we had, and I kid you not, he would start talking about Apollo. Yes, what we did there was great, but, you know, Skylab, that's where we really, you have to see the Skylab stuff. What we were doing there, that's where our television really showed how good it was. I'm like, you're talking about Skylab, that thing that crashed in Western Australia, what, that was good, huh? And about... I'd say 2004, I was very lucky to get somebody selling all their VHS copies of Skylab downlink material off eBay. And it was all haphazardly recorded on about, I think, 20 tapes. And I was watching it going, oh, yeah, fair enough. And then I, after Live TV from the Moon came out, I wanted to do a follow-up about television for Skylab and ESTP and the space shuttle. And in order to get my story correct for Skylab, I put these mission download sequences in chronological order, and I watched them from start to finish. And I was sitting there going, wow, they really did come to their own for Skylab. The stuff they were doing there, the science, the way they were showing experiments, I just thought, whew, I wish I had seen that in school as a kid. That would have made understanding physics and science so much more exciting for me. Why didn't it ever happen? And that's where my passion for Skylab got started.
So let's back up a little bit, just because there's a lot of people that don't know. And to tell you the truth, I really don't know much about it either. What was Skylab? So give us a bit of a background of, one, what it was, what the purpose of the Skylab missions were.
Skylab came about from a program within NASA called Apollo Applications Program. And that utilized Apollo hardware to maintain, how to put this now, and every interview I do, I go, oh, don't forget, I'm just starting to speak English again. I've forgotten what I'm supposed to say in English. They used the stage of a Saturn, an S4B, to put the space station in. It was modified to become a space station. When you look at Skylab, it is the cylindrical shape of the rocket, which was mounted on top. And if I can get the model without cut back to Ron, I'll get the model. I'll display it. So you have to cut back to you, and I'll stand up and yep. Good, there we go.
Fair enough. See,
now the headphone socket will pop out and all that. And
so that's the cool thing is that Dwight is in the studio and he's got
a Saturn 1B on its return trajectory to Earth. Here we go, Saturn 5. There. Now.
Nice.
That is the Saturn V. That was the Skylab configuration. As you can see, everything from there downwards looks like the rockets they sent to the moon. But Skylab had this thing. Now, in here, when you see pictures of Skylab, there are the two solar panels that should have deployed. This opened up, and the space station opened up. And unfortunately, I don't have a model of Skylab to show you how it looked when it was fully deployed, but you'll see it in the film, which is available now on records and tapes. And I'll just put the headphone back on. All live, folks, all live. We're breaking news. And
this just in.
Now, Sky, a way station in space, and Werner von Braun had always, from the beginning, wanted to have a space station orbiting Earth to either go to the moon or further on to Mars. Now, because of budget restrictions and so forth that happened after the first successful lunar landing, they had to deal with a modified plan. And that meant reduced proposals for what Skylab was going to do. And as it turned out, there were 3 manned missions planned: SL2, SL3, SL4. And don't get me started on the numbering system, because that's a whole TV program to itself, how the numbering system changed from SL1 to Skylab 1 to Skylab 2 because of miscommunication within the department. And these while the lunar missions were going on, they were concerned that once the lunar missions finished, that all the resources at NASA, the civil servants and so forth, would be lost once the lunar mission stopped. So they devised a plan to come up with something that extended the already built hardware from Apollo to get really good value for money. And the one obvious proposal was a space station. And that is how Skylab came about.
Fantastic. And so I understand that there is something that's been going around for a long time that is a bit of a controversial subject. And I know a lot of people have talked about it. And I know it's something that I believe that you and Emily Carney in particular are kind of behind the force, saying like, this is not really how things happen. Let's kind of bust these myths. So I'm really interested in that. If you want to give us a little bit of details about what has generally been said, because almost everything I ever see about Skylab is about that story. I don't hear too much about it other than that one thing. So can you give us a little bit of details about that, and how, through what you've done with the work you're working on the Skylab show and the movie, how you've what the conclusion that you've come to as an expert on this, really?
You are obviously referring to the mutiny, correct?
Yes. The space mutiny. That's the way I understand it.
Space mutiny. Any chance of adding echo to when I say it?
There's just a bit of echo. You're good.
Mutiny. So, yes, this is a story which is featured in the film, which I recommend you buy. Someone's going to go, doesn't that guy shut up? Just tell the story. So I will. When they launched, they were an all-rookie crew. This was the final manned mission, SL4, or Skylab 3, depending on who you're talking to. Ed Gibson, Jerry Carr, and Bill Pogue. Now, Bill Pogue was a performance pilot. He could do aerobatics and so forth, and they called him Iron Guts Pogue because he never got sick. Now, they launched in November of 1973, and as soon as they get into orbit, guess who gets sick? Bill Pogue. And they're like, oh, no. And they knew that was the last flight, with the exception of ASTP, until the space shuttle. And that was at a time where Congress was really scrutinizing every cent they were paying for NASA. And the astronauts were thinking, oh, if we mention this, they might cut back on budget. They might say space is not reliable. If these people are getting sick, what do we do? Why are we financing them? So we interviewed Ed Gibson about it, and it's a very sore topic for him. They discussed quietly in the command module, look, we'll save the throw up, we'll analyze it later, and we'll send it down in a quiet mention later once we get ourselves established. Their concern was, being an all-rookie crew, they wanted to perform beyond expectations because, look, these guys know no prior space experience, and suddenly they're there and the guy gets sick. What the hell? So they came to the conclusion they would do that and keep quiet about it. What they didn't realize was the onboard recorder was going within the command module, and that was their downfall, because as the ladies on the ground were transcribing it, they heard this discussion. They're like, well, boss, I think you better listen to this. Approximately 36 hours later, Alan Shepard gets on the open mic and calls the crew up and reprimands them on air, on an open mic, that they made a very stupid decision. And that then triggered the media to get involved and say, this crew is rebellious and less than enthusiastic, and what the hell is going on here? And over the course of time, this has transformed into they wanted to stage a mutiny. Now, I thought, okay, who's to say they didn't? So I analyzed all the, and not just me, Emily and Brian, who runs the Skylab 70s Apollos enthusiast page. We've all gone through this stuff, and There is no evidence of them ever turning off their mics and staging a strike. Now, Ed was explaining the situation that for 2 orbits, that what they had done, they delegated one person to always maintain comms, and the other 2 would take their headphones off and the mic off and go about doing their job. What happened was there was a miscommunication. All of them thought that the other guy was the one that had the comms, so all of them had their headphones turned off. So they missed calls from Houston over 2 orbits. They got back online. There is nothing in the transcripts that say, guys, what's going on here, staging a mutiny? Nothing. Apologies, and everything was back to normal. The press took hold of this and said there's a mutiny happening. What ended up happening was Jerry Carr called down and said, look, your workload is driving us insane. And it wasn't because they had workloads heaped on them. That was a contributing factor. What was causing problems was micromanagement. The ground was trying to determine 48 hours in advance, at 10 seconds past midnight, you guys have to be, performing blah, blah, blah. And Ed was saying, you can't work like that. You can't, even on the ground, you can't plan your day like that. With the possible exception, no offense to my friends in Switzerland, but they possibly could do it, but no one else. And that's how this mutiny story came about. And then several books have perpetuated the myth without any evidence, just based on a single journalist's news story. And over the course of time, one bad report picks on another one and gets the bad information, and it just expands. It's gone viral because, wow, it's very compelling to know about a mutiny that's happening in space, even if there was none.
Yeah.
So
that's crazy. Also check the private chat too when you get a chance there.
Cool.
So I think that's kind of a fascinating thing. It's cool that there's people that are out there that are debunking these kind of these crazy myths that get out there. So I think that's important, especially when it comes to space and science. I was talking with David Eicher just last week about the fact that astronomy is very popular for saying, hey, here's what's really going on in the world. He actually has a YouTube series that does that. So I know that's a big piece of getting these stories right. And so you talked a bit about it a little bit. So Australia. Here's the news. Skylab, this mission that's been going on for a while, something's gone wrong. So can you tell us a little bit about what's going on and what is about to hit Australia that made this kind of fascinating for you?
Right. Okay. What the increased the headphone. Hold on. Now I can't hear a thing you're saying. I knew this was a bad idea. Hold on. Sorry about this. There we go. I'll just have to have the cable in front.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Yeah,
I've got headphones on. You're okay, and you can even actually see my microphone. No worries.
Yeah. Now, where were we? Skylab crashing down. Increased solar activity had caused the orbit to decay of Skylab, and they knew about this. There were predictions about it in the early 70s. They didn't think it'd be as bad as it ended up being. And by 1977, they figured out, and NORAD was seeing Skylab come up on what they called a decay list, which meant this is an object of interest, which is coming down sooner rather than later. And that went against what the people at NASA were saying. And so then media panic or the general panic started, because the footpath or the orbital path of Skylab came over densely populated areas in the United States, some remotely populated areas in Canada, Australia, and parts of Europe. And people just went berserk. And you've probably seen the photos of the paper helmets that had a little spike thing sticking out the top of it that would give you about a nanosecond warning that you were about to get hit in the head by Skylab. And
I have, because I've seen the movie Searching for Skylab.
You have? Oh, no. You did? My condolences. So you can still buy those things, and people sell them on eBay. And there was, I remember this from my childhood, how insane the mass panic was that was going to happen. Even the fact of that thing posted, the poster posted on the window of our principal, we were worried about it. I remember going to school, going to bed the night before it hit, just going, it's going to hit us. Didn't know. And it struck Esperance in Western Australia. It was the first town. It's a coastal town. They were the first place to get the debris come hit them. And it was at midnight that they predicted Skylab was going to impact the Indian Ocean. Now, the news got it wrong, and the people in Esperance were telling me, well, the news channels were telling everybody, it's all past, go back to bed, nothing's going to happen. They went to bed and they said it was like a war zone. They were approximately 5, if not more, sonic booms happening within rapid succession of each other. They looked outside, and don't forget, this was in the middle of the Cold War, and tensions were high at that time with the Soviets. People going outside and seeing debris flying over their heads, thinking, "Oh dear, this is it. This is the end of the world." So it was a big deal in Western Australia. Luckily, a very remote area. There are not that many people living there. That was, I think, a population of approximately 10,000 people back in '79. So. Yeah, there was danger, but it was nothing as if, say, it had been doing this over New York. Suddenly, a little coastal town in a remote region of Australia, it's still not that easy to get there, became the focal point of the world.
And so this leads to the film, and I don't want to, because we don't have too much time left, and I really want to dive into it a little bit, because you not only have the film Searching for Skylab, this passion you get, so now you go looking for it and you're going to make a film about it, right? And I know that you also have a show coming out, and we're going to get to that one next, but give us a little breakdown so you start to like look into all these things, and you're like, you know what, I want to go out here and I want to really see what all this is and put this all together, because somebody needs to tell this story, right? And it's something that becomes your passion, and really, I don't want to say an obsession in a bad way, but you have really put so much into this. You took it to Space Fest, allowed, some of the harshest critics in the world. Like, you want to talk about space fans, those are space fans. One of the coolest events you can go to, where you're just walking around in regular clothes and, hanging out with Apollo and Gemini and Mercury astronauts. It's kind of a crazy thing. And so if those people, particularly the people that were involved with it, happen to be there and see this film, and they're gonna tell you a little bit what it's about, and it got rave reviews from what I remember. So tell us a little bit about putting this thing together, and then starting to also share it with people, especially at something like Space Fest.
Well, part of the reason we made the film was I realized that these astronauts weren't getting any younger, and we had to act fast. After we shot all the interviews, Paul Weitz, Bruce McCandless, and Owen Garriott have since passed away. We didn't get a chance to interview Alan Bean, and I had already lined everything up with him. He passed away as well about 8 weeks before we were scheduled to do so. So we got there in the nick of time to tell their story. It breaks my heart that the last interviews these guys ever gave was to us, but thankfully they did. The reason we showed the film first off in Space Fest, because Space Fest is the best place. You've got people there that, yes, they are the harshest critic, but if you want to get the true answer, they're the ones that are going to give it to you. And we got some harsh criticisms. Well, what we showed there, I thought that was finished, and then when we came back, it's like, there's a lot of work I still have to do. Now, what was the other question? Sorry.
Just the fact that you're going to sit down and you're going to put this film together. You want to create something, you want to say something, and this has become a bit of this part of your life's work. It was putting this thing together and trying to tell the story. And so it's not just Skylab, but it's Searching for Skylab. So give us a little bit of background of the meaning of the title, because there's so much story to tell on this thing, and so few people, especially of a newer generation, really know what it is.
The reason it's called Searching for Skylab is not because we got a whole bunch of metal detectors and went out looking for pieces of Skylab. It came about because a journalist friend of mine in the Netherlands asked me, he said, what is so important about Skylab? What's the meaning? Who cares about who built the components that flew on it? I want to know what it gave me. And I thought, oh, okay, we're searching for a meaning of Skylab. We're searching for Skylab because at the end of the day, it's a forgotten chapter of NASA space history.
Indeed.
And again, I decided to go independent with this because I didn't think a studio would give us the creative leeway that we needed to have the story told properly. Which was a good thing as well, because had I done it for a big studio, the version that was seen at Skylab would have been the final version. Whereas having done it ourselves, I was able to go back and do the changes that were recommended by our harshest critics. And I can tell you, when you put your heart and soul in a film like that, and Ed Gibson is sitting 2 seats up from you watching it, you're just thinking, oh, please let me have gotten everything right.
That's a lot to kind of have on your shoulders with something that you're that passionate about. And so now the film's out, and it's really cool too because of everything that's going on with COVID. You had a special deal going on. Do you still have a deal for that so that way people can see the film? Is that correct?
We did. We've stopped that, but
Still with everybody.
It's still online so if you go to the web address given below, www.searchingforskylab.com, it'll take you to all the links that if you want to just read the books, we've got the books there. You've got podcasts that you can have a look at where I explain a little bit of the story behind making the film. And you can go then to Vimeo and purchase and or rent the film. We allowed a rental because not everybody needs to have a copy that they want to keep on their shelf or on their hard drive. That they can rent it 48 hours and they can watch it at their leisure. Now the new program that's coming up is called iSkylab, which will be
hey now that's my question. That's my question to ask. Hold on. So now that this film is out and that people can rent it and check it out, can you tell us about the new show you're doing called iSkylab? That sounds really interesting.
When I look back at this interview, I'm going to go, oh man, everything I should have not said, I said, and everything I could have done wrong, I did wrong. So my humblest apologies for coming on here and throwing my weight around and just spoiling it for you. I hope you get to keep your job. I really do. Shovel all the blame to me and just go, that guy, look, he's Australian. What do you expect?
He's Australian. What are you going to do? He's a big Australian guy, and that's that's just what happens. But so no, seriously, but this is something too that I kind of want to put out there. Like I've been working really hard on upgrading everything that I'm doing for the podcast and the show that's coming up on Discovery Center. That's going to be the YouTube series that we're going to do there. That's coming in the very near future. So that's a little bit of news people don't know about yet that I'm really excited about. And Dwight as a filmmaker has been there, really late nights for me. I think early mornings for him, I'm not quite sure, to help out and give me some behind the scenes on this, because this is a passion project, and a lot of this has been in a similar version of my home studio in his home studio, and just sitting and working and utilizing the props and the film and everything he has to develop this thing. So it's been a pleasure to kind of see the process, but also see what goes into creating a film like this. And in particular, both of us are now working on something that's going to be, a series, and that's, with you, it's iSkylab, and it's, we've been going back and forth in videos, and it's been really great. And so he's got some really cool stuff that's going on, and it looks like we just lost Dwight, so something happened there. So he's got the new series coming out called iSkylab that you're going to be able to check out here very, very soon, which is going to be just another take on this, and there's going to be some really cool things that are coming up. So hopefully we get Dwight back here in just a second. So it looks like Australia is also a place that's having issues with internet. So again, if you haven't seen this before, do check out Searching for Skylab. The newest version of it is available, as he mentioned below, on www.searchingforskylab.com, as well as across the different social media platforms. There's going to be some really some cool stuff that's coming up with Dwight in the future as well, with all the different platforms he has to put out this kind of story that has been hidden from the public. So everybody, always, it's exciting to have you join us on the show. And there's always a lot of amazing things. We do have more upcoming live shows. We're looking forward to this Thursday. I'll be talking to Mike Mongo. If you don't know him, he's the astronaut teacher. It's going to be an incredible show. And next week, I'm going to bring on the entire team from the Sensoria High Seas that just recently happened. So it's going to be an incredible show there too. So do make sure to join us for that. And of course, it's always great to have everybody join us on the show. Make sure to check out everything from Dwight below. And we do have some stuff that's coming up in the very near future. So do make sure to keep your eye out for that. So let me bring this up. I didn't have it up yet, and I should have. That's going to conclude this episode of the Space Foundation Space4U live podcast. You can subscribe to this podcast and leave us a review on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And of course, our website, www.spacefoundation.org, where you can also learn about the various ways that you can support the Space Foundation. And don't forget to visit us at www.discoverspace.org for more digital content for teachers, parents, and students. You can support the Space Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit, by visiting www.spacefoundation.org/donate. And on all these outlets and more, it is our goal to inspire, educate, connect, and advocate for the space community, because at the Space Foundation, we will always have space for you. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us, and we will see you all on the next episode.